Hi, and welcome to Finding Your Way Through Therapy, a proud member of the Sightcraft Network. The goal of this podcast is to demystify therapy, what can happen in therapy, and the wide array of conversations you can have in and about therapy. Through personal experiences, guests will talk about therapy, their experiences with it, and how psychology and therapy are present in many places in their lives, with lots of authenticity and a touch of humor. Here is your host, Steve Bisson.
Alors, petit train va loin, slowly but surely. We're getting into the new studio. I know you've seen a few of them, but I'm still working on a few kinks. So we're back in the original studio. Welcome to episode 192. Episode 191 was about grief and the process. I hope you go back and listen to it. But episode 192 is with an old friend of the show from episode 29, if you can remember that. So if you go back and listen to that, that'd be great because I know that she's evolved since then, and she's a friend of mine. Her father has been a good friend of mine for several years. But I've developed a good friendship with Jessica Jamison. Jessica is a licensed mental health counselor and certified personal trainer, and she's been doing more with her licensed mental health stuff. And so we talked about before the interview, talked a little bit about what are we going to talk about? Trauma, grief. And she's like, well, trauma and food. And we kind of we still have to work out the kinks, but I hope you enjoyed the interview and I'm sure we're going to figure it out. So here's the interview. Well, welcome everyone. And I'm so excited to have a returning guest, not only a returning guest, let's be very frank, no pun intended. Jessica is someone I met through Frank, who is her father. And I've really enjoyed talking to Jess over the course of several years now. And we have this connection based on that, but we've also developed our own connection, which means a lot to me. And I loved her episode. It was episode 29. So if you want to go back and listen to that, go ahead. But episode 192 will be with Jessica Jamison. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me again, Steve. And it's crazy. I was thinking this, like I was on your podcast, I feel like when it was like a baby, right? Like it was brand new and I was like, this feels like it was forever ago. And I know you're in a different place than then, and I am in such a different place in my career than we recorded that. But yeah, it's crazy to be back here and I'm super excited for this conversation.
The best part of it, Jess, is that that's what I was thinking too when I was like, I didn't listen to episode 29 again. I've listened to it over the course of years, of course. But literally that's 4 years ago. And
Yeah.
I remember where you were at that point and the change in confidence, the change in your social media content, and how you're truly more yourself everywhere else now is truly just a great thing to see from my perspective.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I've made some big shifts and I think because I was finally willing to do that and we can talk more about what those were, but I finally feel aligned with the work that I'm doing. And that has, I think, really what's helped me be able to show up authentically. I don't think I was doing before.
No, and I think that, because of the shift of my podcast, we're really talking about grief, trauma, and everyone thinks it's PTSD. It doesn't have to be PTSD. Trauma can be so many other things. And I think that sometimes our lack of confidence of being ourselves comes from, past rejections, past whatever, and what will people think, and this and that. And, in a good way, I think that both of us have evolved. Well, I think that we've certainly moved. We still care for what people think to a certain extent. That's important too. But for the most part, we don't give a fuck, and we're ourselves. And
Yeah.
to me, that's a great thing because that takes away from all that shame or fear that we got from other people that were imposed by other people and then we took in, which is on us, not on anyone else. But I don't know what you think about that.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree. And so many of the fears that I had in it was around leaving the weight loss industry. So that's where I started. When we recorded episode, what did you say, 29?
Yes.
I was selling weight loss, right? I called myself a weight loss coach and I don't do that anymore. So now I work with eating disorders. I call myself a therapist. I am still a personal trainer, but I was terrified to leave the weight loss industry because I thought that no one would want to work with me. And now, like you said, like I don't really give a shit because
Good.
I am helping people find healing and peace, and that means so much more to me than what other people in the fitness industry might think of me.
Right. And I think that that comes from, gaining confidence, being
Yeah,
true to yourself, and realizing that most of the fears that we have are really not based on reality.
yeah. Oh yeah, they were fears that I was making up. Absolutely.
Well, and again, if I'm breaking a wall, we can always cut it off the show. But I saw that
Yeah.
in you when we were, what about this? What about that? I'm like, just be yourself. Just don't worry about that stuff. And I remember having that conversation with you privately.
Yeah.
And if I'm breaking a wall here, we can always cut it out. But the truth is that I feel like obviously we don't know each other super well, but we know enough of each other. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, Jess, you're enough. Stop thinking about what everyone else is gonna fucking think.
Yeah, I know. And you have helped me so much with that, and along with other people in my life have helped me so much with that. But I've had to like hire my own coaches and seek out my own mentors to help me break through some of that. And it actually I remember a conversation with a business coach about a year ago, and I was in the spot of like, why do I have to choose, right? Like, why do I have to choose to just, right, like stop being in the weight loss industry and not sell weight loss, like because I want to be able to help people who want to lose weight safely and efficiently and in a healthy way. But then I can also work with people struggling with disordered eating and body image. Like, why do I have to choose? And I was like, I do, right? Like it just hit me in that moment. Like, no, like I have to make this choice. Like I cannot be afraid to fully step into this because it was just holding me back. And I think that's when I signed up for your course, like how to start your own private practice. And we can, talk about all of the fears and blocks that I had in terms of calling myself a therapist, and how I worked through that. But you're so right. Like I've struggled with confidence my entire life.
Right. And I think that, in episode 29, you did talk about this and the eating issues that came with that and the confidence. And we could process whatever you want. This is your podcast because I definitely, the other part too is that not because you're my friend, not because of anything else, I want to really help promote you because I know Jess. I know that Jess is finally showing up as Jess. And it's just like everyone should meet Jess. That's how I truly feel because
Oh, thank you.
we were talking even pre-interview. I talk about movement and nutrition, not diet and exercise. And you agreed with
Mhm.
me right away. And
Mhm.
to me, it's like changing the value of, particularly, I know it's going to sound sexist, but particularly women who attach their value onto this weight loss and the exercise and what it's going to look like. And that's all based on trauma and shame. So, I mean,
Mhm.
you can go wherever you want because there's so many things we can go with that, but
Oh,
please.
oh, geez, I have to take it from there. Okay.
Hey,
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
just here to
So
host. I'm not here to do anything else. All right.
you're supposed to lead this, Steve. Come on. Yeah. No, I totally agree. I landed here because I struggled with disordered eating and body image, and I don't know if I would use the word trauma to describe. I don't know. I mean, I struggle with that. Like, and I definitely have struggled over the years with telling my story because I felt like what I went through wasn't bad enough. Like I wasn't sick enough,
But that's not a
right? Like
trauma response. It's not bad enough, right? Right.
yeah, no,
But whatever.
right,
Okay, I'm
exactly.
sorry. I'm
That's
gonna shut up. I
you're
said
right.
you're gonna lead this. I'm
No,
gonna
but you're right. You're right. And that's why I've enjoyed being on podcasts so much because it's helped me heal immensely and own my story, right? And be able to share it is healing, right, within itself. And be able to reach other women who might be feeling that way, who don't want to seek support because they don't feel like their food trauma or their body image struggles are bad enough. Because that's just it's just not true, right? Like, I think that food trauma can be, as we were saying, it can be one big thing. It can be not having access to food as a child, like
Right.
that's big. Or it can be 1,000 little conversations that you've had with your caregiver about cleaning your plate before you get up from the dinner table or eating your broccoli before you get your dessert. Like I've worked with women who have had, numerous body comments from their dads, their moms, their siblings. And I've also had women who a stranger has said one thing to them about their appearance and they have carried that with them throughout their entire lives. And so for me, I think my struggles probably did come from a family who was obsessed with weight loss, right? My parents, they're wonderful people and I had a great childhood and they were always on a diet, right? Always. To this day, they still are. And so as a girl growing up, like I carried that with me. Like I'm not worthy of love unless like I am small enough, right? Because they had that expectations for themselves, so why wouldn't I?
Right.
So it was just years and years and years of growing up with that. And again, like they didn't know any better. I think, my parents grew up like, and they were raising kids at the peak of diet culture, right? When like Beachbody became super popular and the Atkins diet and all of that, like just blew up. And so they were doing the best that they could.
Right.
But, I think, I don't know where I was going with this. I think just to share that trauma when it comes to food and body image struggles, it doesn't have to look a certain way. And I don't think it's often recognized enough.
Well, I'll go back to something I've said on the podcast many times. I say it to my clients. I'm going to say it here too, because it's important. I don't get to decide what trauma is for other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then most people are like, do the comparison game of their trauma. And I'm like, just because, and again, trigger warning for those who listen, that's because you never held 3 blue babies because you're not a paramedic or a first responder, doesn't mean your trauma is not valid. That
Mm-hmm.
you were at a
Mm-hmm.
9/11 doesn't make it that you're not valid to have trauma from watching it on TV, and so on and so forth. And I think that the part that I always kind of remind, especially around food and appearances, I know your parents, I know they're great people, and people do the best they can with what they got and the information they
Mm-hmm.
receive, and to me, like, again, I'm not defending any of them. I'm just realizing that's the same thing I've said about my parents. They did the best they can. If they
Oh, for
purposely screwed
sure.
me up, I'd be like, okay, they purposely fucked me up. But I know your parents. I know for a fact they never tried to purposely do this.
Of course not.
That doesn't mean it
No.
doesn't affect you and it doesn't have trauma. And that's why, like, for me, food trauma, like, most people don't want to recognize that because, like, that's not important enough. Well, if you're afraid to eat a fucking donut, sorry, I'm swearing a lot now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's something really strange about that. If you're afraid of eating 12 donuts at the same time, okay, I get that one. But eating a donut, and I mean, it's a great way to introduce a little bit of what you do too. But the donuts and dumbbell stuff. But to me, that's where the trauma lies: is that you can't eat a donut, really?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mainly work with women, in their, I would say ages 30 to 60. So all different ages. And yeah, what they struggle with is things like that food noise, right? It's just constant. It's constant. And there's a lot of shame and guilt followed by what they eat, right? They eat and then they feel so much shame and guilt about it. And then the process just starts all over. And so, and I am trying to, and I've recently learned this. I was reading about it, but we often see eating disorders as kind of like a maladaptive coping skill, right? Like, so there's some sort of trauma that occurred, and then the eating disorder is a maladaptive way to cope with that trauma. And what I would argue, what I'm actually like, feel like I'm seeking to understand in this moment as I do this work is that it's active trauma, right? Like if you think about the binge restrict cycle or someone who struggles with bulimia, you are in an active state of trauma. Like you are not feeling safe in your body, right? And your body does not trust you to keep it safe
Right.
when you're engaging in those behaviors. So it's just I think it really helps to see those struggles with food and body as not only a response to trauma, but
Well,
you're currently living in it.
I mean, I don't want to go neurologically too far, but when you
Yeah.
have shame or those
Hmm.
what people would describe as negative emotions, there's no such thing, by the way, but that's a different story for a different day. But what does shame do? It results into cortisol in your brain going off. And what does cortisol do is like, oh, and I'm in a fight or flight response. I got to save this fat. So not only by
Hmm.
shaming yourself are you perpetuating the trauma and it's an active trauma, you're also like, oh, your body's like, oh, we got to store this donut because, and then what does it happen? It also affects your physiological aspect of your life. So yeah, it is active trauma and it is absolutely what food can do in your brain and how you perceive it.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And the crazy thing about food is that you can't just stop eating,
Right.
right? Like you have to eat to live. And so I think that makes healing your relationship with food incredibly difficult, but we don't have a choice.
Well, and again, I'll share my recent, and I'm going to just go and over some of the stuff, not completely in detail. I did Wegovy for about 6 months,
Hmm.
and I was losing the weight, and I lost the weight, and I'm no longer on it for other medical conditions that I really don't want to share here right now. But one of the things that people would say to me, which always perplexed me, they're like, "Oh, you're not hungry, then don't eat." I'm like, that's not a goal in
Oh,
life, not to eat.
no.
I'm like, what? Like, and in my head, maybe because I'm a dude, I'm like, how is that even fucking smart? And then I realized that there's a lot of this perpetual societal, oh, you're eating too many things, and that's why if you don't eat, you'll be fine, and perpetuates that trauma, perpetuating anorexia and
Yeah.
bulimia. Because if you eat, obviously you got to throw it up, because God forbid it stays in your fucking body.
Yeah. Yeah. I always tell this to my clients, sometimes eating disorders are not about the food. Sometimes they're actually about food. And if you are not eating enough, or sometimes maybe you are, but there's a difference between physical restriction of the food and a mental restriction. So some women, they might be eating the food, but they're shaming themselves like as they do it, after they do it, right? Like and telling
Right.
themselves like never again, I start over Monday, right? So that's an example of more of like the mental restriction.
Right.
um but yeah, not eating enough, not fueling your body consistently is only gonna make things worse. But that's what society tells us to do, right? That's what diet culture tells us to do to lose weight, is just restrict what you're eating. And that's the worst thing that you can do for your body, because then it doesn't trust you. It doesn't trust you to take care of yourself and to listen to your internal cues versus following all these external rules.
Right. And I think that this is something when you were saying that, all I can think of is every time I've been over to your parents' house or your family's house, there's always a ton of food.
Oh, the
Literally.
food pushing in my family is unreal.
And it's always like a kind of like a message like, wait a minute, we're in a diet, so to speak, which is should be nutrition, but anyway.
Right.
But there's like tables of food, not the expression of tables of food. There's literally tables of food at your house.
Literally. Yeah. Yeah. The food stuff in my family, it's absolutely fascinating. So I come from like a big Italian family. Like we are all about food. But yeah, like and that's maybe why I struggled with food, because I was so confused,
Yes.
right? Like you're right. Like on one end, I grew up with not only just my parents, but extended family members always on diets. Yet at every occasion, every tiny little celebration, like big or small, like there was food. It was all about the food, and you were being told you have to eat more, right? Like the first thing that would happen when a guest comes to my house is my mom is like, "What can I get you? What do you need to eat? I have this, I have this, I have this." Like you're like, "I'm not hungry." Okay, well, how about this?
Right.
So it's this crazy back and forth with the food stuff. And again, looking back, it's like no wonder I had so much food noise, right?
Right.
Right, as a teenager. But yeah, setting boundaries around food and my family has been huge in my healing. And my mom hasn't liked it, and other family members hasn't liked it. But that's definitely something that I've had to do for me, and in my recovery.
Well, I think that there's a couple of things. First of all, I think it's important because a lot of families are like that. I think that you see that a lot in most westernized cultures. Food is a sign of wealth, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And as we go along in 2025, it definitely is. But I also think that, maybe it's helpful to think about how you kind of got over with setting those limits and boundaries with your family. Because even when I'm there, I sometimes I will not love you, Frank, love you, Doreen. This is not about non-love. But like, oh, you want more? No, I'm good. No, no, you sure you want more? Like, what do I say to that? I mean, come on, stop. Like, I think that once in a while I'll say, oh, I have two legs. I could definitely get there if I want to. But I think
Yeah,
that
yeah.
it's important to kind of like share kind of like how to set those limits and boundaries to people so that, even if family won't like it, by the way, a lot of people won't like it, and that's fine. You're not
Yes.
there to please them.
And that's exactly what I had to get over, right? That was huge for me, and realizing like people are not going to like these boundaries, and it doesn't matter, and I think, yeah, and I think you can be very gentle, right? You can take that approach, or you can get spicy and sassy with it. I think it really depends on the person, on either side, like how you want to handle it, and how, right, how you think how you want to handle it with that other person, knowing them. I'm a super spicy, sarcastic person, so like that is the route that I might take, but not everyone is like that. And my mom is not like that at all. So I have learned to be a little bit more gentle with her while still keeping my boundaries around food very firm and very clear. And she makes sassy remarks to me all the time about boundaries that I set with my kids, and how I want food and bodies to be talked about around my children. And I don't think she likes it, but she listens to it and she respects it. But it has taken like me setting those clear and firm boundaries over and over again. And anyone out there is listening who is trying to set boundaries with their family around food, it takes time and patience, because your these boundaries are new, right? And we need to give people time to adjust to them.
Not only that, it's a well-worn road, right? We celebrate, we have food.
Mm-hmm.
People don't feel good, we bring food. Like that's the other thing I find particularly fascinating about funerals. Whereas there are a ton of when you're grieving and having all this cortisol shooting out of you, a lot of food and a lot of booze. And to me,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, what a setup for failure for anyone there. And setting those limited boundaries are tough, especially when they're down because of grief and struggles. But you're
Yeah.
right. I think that learning to not people please, I think, is very, very
Mm-hmm.
important.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Because that's what we want to do, especially when it comes to food. Because like you said, it's a way that we often express our love and care, and we don't want to make someone feel rejected. And yeah, go ahead.
But I was going to ask you, so realizing that it has nothing to do with a rejection of others, but how you feel. And I think that that's the
Mm,
change of control. Like we feel like we got to control people's reactions. Unfortunately, that's wrong because you can't control them, number one. And number two, even if you try to do your best to control it, you're screwed. I'm not saying to be impolite, but I'm saying don't try to control things you can't control.
yeah, yeah. And if we go back to trauma, right? Like we those ha right, who have experienced trauma, again, big T trauma, small T trauma, whatever, seek that control. And I think that is totally true when it comes to food, right? We want to control it so bad. And I always encourage my clients to let go of that control.
Mhm.
And instead of trying to control it, your job is to respond to your body, right? And if you, so, circle back to the food pushing, or being around family who shows love and affection through food and always wanting you to eat more, right? Like you can't, you're right, you can't control that, right? But you can tune in and respond to your body and its needs at that moment. And you can say yes or no based on that.
And I think that that's what's important is that you don't need to listen to exterior cues. You got to listen to your internal cues. And
Yes.
we've changed in society how we perceive that because we let the external cues control what we want.
Oh, absolutely. That's what diet culture has done. right? All of these weight loss programs is they give you rules and guidelines to follow. And all my clients come to me and they're like, well, I need the rules. I do better, right? I do better with the rules. Let's challenge that. You think that you do, right? But it's because you have been completely stripped of your intuition, of your ability to tune into your body and be an intuitive eater, to be an intuitive mover. Because if you watch kids eat, like I have young kids, if you watch them eat, they are such little intuitive eaters. It's amazing. Like my daughter will eat her broccoli and leave a piece of cookie, right? Something that as adults, we're like, I would never do that, right?
But
Because
it's
all
the
of those external rules
right. But we
have
created
taken it
this.
away.
I think that we
Yeah.
created this forbidden fruit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's the other part too, that I think is the problem, is that what's wrong with eating a cookie? Nothing. But when your body needs carrots or needs celery, you see it as a punishment instead of seeing your body wants that. Stop thinking about it as a punishment or a reward. Think about it as food and fuel for your body.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, yeah, we could have a whole conversation around food labeling and what that has done to our ability to be intuitive eaters. But yeah, I am all about like balancing what you want with what you know your body needs. And that's something that I think it when you have been a chronic dieter, you've been on diet after diet after diet, you don't know how to do that.
Well, let's switch gears for a second because I want to talk also because you're a personal trainer also.
Hmm.
Well, I ate at your parents' house a lot. So I'm going to go to the gym, wear a long sleeve shirt with some plastic bags around me so I can lose all my weight that I gained from eating all the food. I'd like you to talk like, and again, you
Yeah.
laugh, but how many people think that way? Number one. And number two, how
I'm
do we
I'm
challenge that?
I'm laughing because I did that kind of stuff, right? Like when I first got into fitness, it was coming from a very unhealthy place. And I didn't see that because it was normalized, right? Like so, I found a lot of healing in weightlifting. I do believe that weightlifting like completely saved my life and I still live to this day. But if I really look back on it, exercise for me was obsessive and it wasn't healthy. And I burned my body to the ground doing it and doing crazy things like that. Like I would look up and like do research on like how to sweat more after a meal to like burn it all off. Like
I'm sorry for laughing, but I get it.
the stuff that I did was crazy. I broke my arm, right? So I've really, because of my struggles with disordered eating, I lost my menstrual cycle when I was a teenager. And so I've like really poor like bone density. So I've broken like, I don't know, 5 different bones. And I broke my arm in college. And I would go to the gym and get on the elliptical with a broken arm and people would be like, "Oh my gosh, good for you. Like, I
Good
can't
for
believe you're
you.
here again. Like, you're so disciplined. Like, wow. Like, I don't know if I could do that." Like, I was praised for all of that stuff. And that just kept me in it, right? Because, oh, geez, right? My thought process was like, well, what if I stop? Right? Like, what are they going to think of me if I don't go to the gym for 3 hours a day and I gain weight? Like, what is everyone going to think? Right? They're going to judge me for that. And so, yeah, in my own healing, I have completely changed the way that I see exercise and movement and fitness, and I now use it as a modality for healing in my work with clients. And so I can't take the personal trainer out of the therapist and the therapist out of the personal trainer. It just can't. So I bring, I bring both disciplines into the work that I do. And yeah, it's super fun. And I believe that fitness should be fun and as an act of self-care and not, like you said, punishment for the gigantic meal that you ate.
Well, I think it's also very important to think about that. I don't think you should ever separate the personal trainer from the therapist. And
Yes,
that's
thank you.
important because I'm just gonna go on a small rant and come back. When I have people who come to me about being a therapist and all that, and I said, don't make the mistake of losing yourself. And they always go, what do you
Mm,
mean? Stop wearing the mask of whatever the hell you learn. Be yourself.
yeah,
And yes, you can be
yeah.
yourself and professional, and both can work. but most people don't get that. You know, the asshole behavior and the sarcastic tone that I use has paid dividends to me more than I can say in therapy. But if you listen to some of the professors and teachers that I had, they would have said, "You're going to push people away, and that's not professional, and that's not ethical, or
Mhm.
whatever." Like,
Yeah.
I'd like to tell them to go f themselves at this point. But anyway,
No, no, you're so right. And I can't tell you how long that took me to learn. Right. And that's what we talked about at the beginning of this episode. And right. And I left, the clinical position that I had after I graduated to pursue personal training because I had a miserable grad school experience. So I got my master's in family therapy, which I obviously don't do for a reason. Props to all the family therapists out there. Um, but like I started realizing, I think in grad school that the mind body connection was so important. But I don't think that anyone at the time, like my professors and stuff, like I don't think no one was supportive of that. Like I had this vision of how do I integrate both? And I wanted to figure that out so badly, but I didn't get the support at the time. And I left. I completely left the field for years to pursue personal training and eventually landed myself back here and I'm still figuring it all out. I have this vision and I don't know if I've quite gotten there, but I have all the faith and hope in the world that I will because it's something that I am super passionate about. Like I said, using movement as a modality for healing.
well, that's and I don't have any doubt you'll get there. I think it takes a while to get to that confidence level for just about anyone, but it would always frustrate me when and this is just between you and my audience at this point, when you would tell me, "Oh yeah, I'm a personal trainer." You're a therapist also, but I'm a personal trainer. Yeah, you're a therapist also. And I
I
had these
know,
fights with
I
you, if you remember.
know,
Not real
I
fights, by
know.
the way. We get along great. But yeah, no, and I think that that's what one of the things is that never remove yourself from who you are. And that
Yeah.
also saves you a lot. And when we talk about nutrition and trauma, about movement and trauma, it never removes,
Hmm.
one of my clients recently, who's a personal trainer, showed me a research that shows that cardio actually doesn't work as well as building muscle. And building muscle will actually help you lose more weight than doing cardio. And I found that fascinating. It's a great study. If I can find it, I'll link it in the show notes. But it's changing our thought process and not dismissing it. That's really important.
Yeah. Yeah. And we talked about all of those rules around food, and we also have rules around fitness and exercise. And the work that I do is really helping clients let that go. Like, I honestly don't care that lifting weights is better for weight loss than cardio. I honestly,
No,
I don't.
good.
Right? Like, I care which one you find fun. I care about what lights you up, what makes you feel strong and confident. And if you're a cardio person, great. If you're a person who loves to lift, awesome. But like, I can't tell you how many half marathons that I've run that I have been so freaking miserable. Like, I hate running, but I did it because I thought that I should.
Right.
And now I will occasionally go out for a light run because I want to, and for no other reason than that.
I think I was talking to someone. I never got that runner's high, and I ran a couple of half marathons myself.
No, I never did.
And I'm like, nowadays, like, I joke around with some of my clients who continue running. I say, "Oh, I've kind of like hung my shoes up from doing half marathons and all that because truly I don't enjoy them. It helped me in many ways, but I don't enjoy it. Now I enjoy walks. I enjoy getting on a bike, which if you told me 10 years ago I'd get on a bike and enjoy it, I would have said you're wrong. And
Mhm.
so things change also, and respect the evolution of human beings. You talk about,
Yeah.
you don't care about muscle versus cardio and all that. To me, it's the same thing. It's like if you start enjoying really lifting weights, then lift weights. Who cares? It's movement. That's important.
Yeah, it all counts. It all counts. And I think that's, where I've moved into on the personal training side of my business. And I wish they weren't so separate. Like, to have to call myself a therapist and a personal trainer, I'm like, I need to come up with one word for this. like I wish that I could. So what I have been moving into is trauma informed personal training. And that feels so aligned because, it's really about that client autonomy, right? And to be able to speak up for yourself and say, I don't like this. This doesn't feel good to me. This doesn't feel safe, and me understanding, right, that trauma is history and how someone might show up. So, for example, if someone's canceling on me all the time, I'm not going to just jump to, well, this person isn't motivated enough. They don't understand their why big enough. It's just not important enough to them. Like, no, like there's something deeper going on here that is preventing this person from showing up to their personal training sessions. And we need to work through some of that. And then, making sure, I think consent is huge. Asking clients like, are you okay with this? Like, what do you want out of your session? Like, are you okay if I correct you on your form, right? Would you rather end with some gentle stretching today, or would you rather, do a cardio finisher, right? And helping them being able to like tune into what they need for movement that day. Again, like we said, instead of following some sort of rule about like what's best for whatever.
Right. Well, I came up with a name for you if you ever wanted.
Yes, please.
You're a movement therapist.
Oh, all right. I can roll with that.
Trademark. I saved it. I got trademark. No one can listen.
Interesting.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I think that
Okay.
like
All right.
when you were talking, I'm like we were again pre-interview. I'm done with the diet exercise world. I am in the movement and nutrition
Yeah.
world, and I thought that the movement with the therapy would probably be a good way to combine both of it. But anyway, I've trademarked it, so you'll owe me all the trademark money you make out of it. I'm all joking, of course, but
Absolutely, Steve.
I want to kind of like wrap it up here
Yeah.
because I want to hear more about a little bit of, what are you doing right now and what do you want to like talk about and how people can reach you because I think it's important.
Yeah, so I have my own private practice in the eating disorder and body image space. Like I said, I work mainly with women and with the specialty in binge eating, emotional eating, and body image challenges. And I feel that you do not have to come to me with some like DSM diagnosis. I think these challenges really do exist on a spectrum. And if you are just someone who is struggling with again that food noise and that shame, like I do encourage you to seek support from a licensed therapist who specializes in disordered eating. And then I also offer personal training. And again, my specialty there is clients with mental health challenges. So I would say all of my personal training clients have therapists. I am just in the role of helping you work on your physical health as your trainer. Yeah, and you can find me on my website, revolutionhc.com, and on Instagram. I try really hard to keep up with posting there, and you'll find, content that is weight inclusive from a health at every size standpoint. And yeah, my handle is at Just Be Jamison.
So I'll put all that in the show notes, and I hope people do reach out to you. And if you go see her social media, I give credit to Jess. I don't have that exposure of myself like she does, and she does such a magnificent job. So go check it out.
Oh, thank
Uh,
you.
and then diagnosing wise, I just want to say, if you want to have fun one day and realize that diagnosing doesn't mean as much as most people think, go check out. And I had to look it up while we were talking, but this is a real diagnosis. It's W56.12. Everyone who is listening, please go check it out. Put it as an ICD-10 code and then tell me what it was. Write it in the notes or send me a DM and you'll all laugh. And this will prove to you how unimportant those diagnoses truly
Oh,
are.
all right. W56.
Point
Well,
12.
got it.
Don't
Got
tell
it.
anyone. Don't tell
Got
anyone
it.
if you
Doing
look it up.
it.
All right. Well, please reach out to Jess. And, Jess, we didn't have a plan, and I think we did a magnificent job of just being ourselves here. So I really appreciate your time and all the compliments I gave you. I hope you understand this is not a podcast thing. It's truly things I mean. So happy to see you as a movement therapist.
Thank you so much for having me, Steve. Your mentorship means the world to me.
Well, thank you. I do my best. Well, that completes episode 192. Again, Jessica Jamison, thank you so much. Friend of the show, friend of mine. Great interview. I enjoyed thoroughly to hear more about her evolution, not only as an LMHC and how she's doing everything and working with the eating habits of individuals so they can have a healthy life. But episode 193 will be returning co-host Courtney Romanowski. She'll be talking with me to Lisa Manka, and I can't wait to do that interview, and I hope you join us then.
Please like, subscribe, and follow this podcast on your favorite platform. A glowing review is always helpful. And as a reminder, this podcast is for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only. If you're struggling with a mental health or substance abuse issue, please reach out to a professional counselor for consultation. If you are in a mental health crisis, call 988 for assistance. This number is available in the United States and Canada.